we're now ready to start the next stage of this painting. There's a couple of things that I'm going to want to do before I actually start painting, just because I know they're going to be an issue if I don't take care of them before I put paint down. You know, this whole thing, if you have two wet areas together, they're going to bleed into each other. So if I need to do any lifting, now is a good time to do it. And I'm feeling like there's a few places on these flowers, particularly right here, down around this lip of that flower, and there's a couple of other places that could be a little bit lighter. And if I do those right now, then they have a chance of drying before I start actually getting a lot of paint on here. So let me go ahead and do a little bit of lifting. If you, perhaps you remember that if I watercolor paint is always water soluble. Depending on the color, it depends on how easily it lifts, because it can also stain the page. But I can come in here, dampen an area with my brush, and then rub on it until it lightens. And this helps me get this little corner lifted. Now I want to take a clean, dry rag or tissue, paper towel, a tissue will work as well, and lift that off. So now I have a much lighter area. Let me get this right out to that edge. I've also come in and redrawn my flowers on here. Now some of them, when I put down this red, it spread a little bit more than my original flowers were, and I like that. So I am going to use the new spread out, and so I've moved my flowers out a little bigger than what I had originally drawn them. This is another area here that I want to make a little bit lighter. This whole petal. I need to put that paint, that water on there, let it sit for just a minute to sort of soften those, just like when you put water in your pan to get that paint a little softer. So if I let it just sit for 30 seconds, 20 seconds, it doesn't take very long, but just long enough to wet that area. This is another spot up here where I want to make that petal maybe slightly different than what I had painted. And if I lift this off, I can work on that later. Make that a little bit lighter. Not necessarily getting back to white. And if I really want to get back to an even lighter color, like this one here, Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. It's a melamine sponge. I've just gotten it a little bit damp and wrung the extra water out, and now I can take and do a little more aggressive lift than I can get with my brush. Get that just a little bit lighter there. Where else did I need to lift it? There was another petal over here that I wanted to get just a little bit lighter, just to pull some light across there. It doesn't need to be a whole bunch, but it just felt like it needed a little bit. Okay, I think that that is going to take care of that. Now, how do we proceed from here? As with every painting, we always got choices on how to do things. I had people ask in my class whether this was a painting where we should come in and put resist over the flowers that we painted and then paint that background. That would be one way of approaching it. The resist might pick up a little bit of this paint, but it's not that dark, and it could be done that way. But I want to do what's called negative painting. And so that is where I come in and I paint the background and bring it up right next to where my positive foreground is going to be. So and then as I do that, I want to do it in a couple of layers. So we're going to start with our palest green and then come in and do the darker green in on top of that. I've mixed up some sap green. I think sap green is going to work pretty well here. And just start up in this corner. So then as I come in close to my flowers, I'm going to paint right next to them, not worrying about the stems of the background parts, but I am worried about where these flowers are. So I've drawn my drawing there, and now I'm finding the edges of what I drew in. Some of what is red is going to become background, and as you can see, as soon as I get some green on there, that red loses its vitality, its brightness, and it dulls it down. I'm doing all my paint strokes sort of in the direction that I see leaves heading over there. Now, if I need to get a little more control with my brush, I could come in with a smaller brush in around these plants if I want, but as long as I've got a nice tip on a big brush and can control it, I'm leaving a few little light spots behind too. I sort of like those. As long as I can control my brush, I'd rather work with a bigger brush than a smaller brush because I can hold a lot more paint on it, and it will force me to be a little bit more loose. So if I point paint in toward a center area, I can get a little small tip and then pull that out. Paint in toward there, get a nice little small tip. And I can just use some of these flower marks that I made to be. Now this area down in here has some more lighter areas, and I've also got some stems that are running this direction, so let's just paint some of those that way and leave behind some little light yellow spots to allow some of that light to show through. Now these stems are going to go, they're fairly light, I'm going to paint some dark back behind them. So once again, I'm going to just paint right up onto those stems. And let's see, maybe, yeah, that looks like a good shape. Not worrying about making any of this perfect. I want that feeling of what those are doing. And then there's quite a bit of light space down in here, so I gotta be a little careful about coming in and being too dark with this. Maybe leave some leaf shapes with that yellow. Don't want a white right at the very corner, but yeah, so we're just sort of playing with this and letting my brush sort of talk about what's there. It's fun to be a little bit loose as you're painting. Now let's see, do I want to do there or do I want to do up here next? I don't want my hand to be in the way, so let me work across the top here. We're going to be going quite a bit darker, but there are some light places up there. So our first layer in here is going to be a little bit lighter, and then we'll put a darker layer on after it dries. So now I'm coming in and I'm finding some more of these spaces. Being fairly bold with my strokes, knowing that we're going to come back in and do more work on this later. Leaving behind some whites, some yellow spaces. Not worrying that that's not perfect. But notice how when I stop, I sort of stop with an uneven space, so that that then shows on my work later. Because everything you do with your watercolor, and this is one of the hard things about watercolor, is that each layer is visible. And if you do some really sort of straight, unnatural lines when you stop, like right here, I want to really get that pulled away from there immediately, so I don't have an outline that looked like I was just outlining those leaves. I want to work my way, make the outline, and then pull it out into the body of the painting, and then I can stop with this uneven stuff, and that won't matter at all. And let me just come in with a little bit of paint here. I'm going to make that relatively light for right now. It's going to be going darker, but there are some relatively light pieces up in there that that I want to have. And let's see, this flower right here, that should be dry enough now that I can paint next to it. Just find the shape of this, find the shape of that. And that's going to come down past this flower right here. That's going to go darker later. And we'll just bring that up onto there. So I'm working fairly quickly because I don't want to get bogged down into lots of detail. I want to just find those big shapes, of what's going to happen. I'm just leaving a few little yellow spaces behind, not very many. We may get rid of more of them later. I'd have some stems up in there later, build some leaves up in there later, and I might not. I might just make it fairly dark. But there are some light and dark patterns up in there that I can work with later. And depending on how much I want to fuss with this, let's see, I need to think about this flower here for just a minute. Yeah, we'll keep that little piece. We'll come down into that little piece and then find that. Sometimes I have to concentrate on what I'm doing and not talk, so I hope you don't mind. I might have to mix up some more sap green. We're going to run out here before I'm finished. Now there's a flower that was underneath of there. It was part of what I lifted here, and I'm actually going to pull this in and on top of here just a little bit. Okay, now I need to quickly come, before that dries, I want to quickly come and grab the edge of that outline that I did, spread it out here a little further. And I need to mix up some more sap green. So let me get some out of my pan. It's slightly dry here. And I just got some splatters in here. Do I care? You know, I'm going to let those splatters be part of the painting. Sometimes a little loose splatter work actually looks really nice. Okay, so now we are working my way around this flower right here. And let's just take a couple of those leaf marks up there because they were going to look unnatural if I stopped. It's going to get darker, so a lot of that's going to get hidden. Don't have to worry about it too much. Now let's go ahead and come back in here and work so I can keep working toward this corner because this is where my hand is, and so I want to work so that that is the last place that I work. Now, up in here, there's some light green, and maybe I don't like what I just did with those flowers, but too late now. We're working from two sides of some of these things, so I have to think a little bit about where is this side and that side going as I paint between them, which can be a little unnerving at times. I think that works. And there's another little hole right in here that, and go like that. Okay, I think that's going to work. So isn't this interesting that as I put this green on, that red starts coming in and off the page? We will be coming in and enlivening those reds with darker colors in some places and more yellow in it and a few dark places to make that really stand out. Right now it's not super bright, and we are going to want that brighter in the end. And let's see, I think this is going to come up here further. It's going to break through there. We're a little bit different than the photograph. That's fine. I like that we're a little bit different. I pulled those flowers maybe together just a little bit more. I want to paint around that. Keep moving so I don't end up with hard edges where I don't want them. There's a stem that comes down here, so that straight line is fine. Now this is some of what's going to happen with that darker when it comes up on there. We're going to have a stem there and maybe some leaves. So as I build this in just a little bit darker, that stem can stand out. There's another stem over here too. Let's just bring those so that I can see them. Yeah, I like that. And maybe some breaks of this yellow. I could have left more yellow back up in there, but I didn't, and it's okay. I really wanted to, I could do a little bit of lifting in there. But in some ways, this yellow is annoying to me. It takes away from this flower and those flowers, so I don't really necessarily want that quite so bright there, but I do want some down in here and a little over in there. And I want a feeling of that there, but not like it was. Okay, so let's see, we're down in here. Work around that flower. And maybe there's another flower petal there. So a lot of this is just sort of intuitiveness as you work your way around and you go, now let's see what's going to look interesting here. How should I, maybe this leaf needs to be a little less sticky out there. And then this one's going to come down and be a little bit lower. I can put more there's a flower that's down in here. I'm going to just paint right over that because it's in the shadow and I don't want it really bright. I want to go in and get a nice little hard edge here. I want to paint into it and then pull back out of it. Paint into it, paint into it, and then pull the rest of that out. Spread that down pretty quickly. There's a few pieces of white here that I don't necessarily want to lose. I actually like that there's just a little bit of actual white on that flower. We really do want somewhere in the painting to have white on it. Let's see, that guy, yeah, not sure how I want to deal with that guy. It's that little bud that's right next to there, and is he going to be annoying or is it going to be a good thing? Let me just, that guy's going to go down a little bit. So I'm going to stop here so that I can look at this just a little bit before we start coming in and doing darker bits. But let me just do one little thing, and that's that I want to lift a little bit over in here. I think this should get some a little bit lighter spaces in here, and I got it a little bit dark. And maybe I don't like that line there either, so I can do that as a lift. Okay, it's a little bit lighter, not a lot lighter, but that's fine. First layer underneath, getting me some green, starting to define the shape of those flowers.